Saint Francis of Assisi was born October 3rd of the year 1226. He was an Italian Roman Catholic friar and preacher. He founded the men's order of Friars Minor, the women's order of Saint Clare, and the third order of Saint Francis and the custody of the Holy Land. Francis is one of the most venerated religious figures in history. In 1219, he went to Europe in an attempt to convert the Sultan to put an end to the conflict of the Crusades. By this point, the Franciscan order had grown to such an extent that its primitive organizational structure was no longer sufficient. He returned to Italy to organize the order. Once his community was authorized by the Pope, he withdrew increasingly from external affairs. Francis is also known for his love of the Eucharist. In 1223, Francis arranged for the first Christmas live nativity scene. According to Christian tradition, in 1224 he received the stigmata during the apparition of seraphic angels in a religious ecstasy, making him the first recorded person in Christian history to bear the wounds of Jesus' passion.
One of his most famous prayers is called the peace prayer, which it tells you how to calm down when you're in tough situations. Just want peace in your life.
Francis lived the high-spirited life typically of a wealthy young man, even fighting as a soldier for Assisi. In 1201, he joined a military expedition against Perugia and was taken as a prisoner at Collestretta, spending a year as a captive. It is possible that his spiritual conversion was a gradual process rooted in this experience. Upon his return to Assisi in 1203, Francis returned to his
The peace prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me show love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is giving that we receive the pardon, and we pardon in dying that we are born to eternal life.
Many virtues, but
Amen.
we can begin by saying that he was a simple man. He pursued simplicity. This does not mean that he had limited intelligence, or that he pursued simplicity or simplicity's sake. Rather, it means that he was successful at eliminating everything from his life that did not enhance his understanding and love of Jesus. In other words, he kept to what was essential in life, which was God, the state of our soul, judgment, and eternal life. He realized that to be simple is to see things with the eyes of God. Saint Francis pursued simplicity because he innately knew that God himself is simple. Other characteristics of Francis' life and the virtues of faith and love. Saint Francis understood that by praying for faith, by acting faithfully and lovingly, his spiritual muscles would be stressed, making him grow stronger in faith and love of God. He knew that God's grace would assist him in his spiritual exercise if he committed himself to it. He had devoted a lot of time to seeking a closer relationship with God and discovering God's purpose for his life. Gradually, Francis became convinced that God wanted him to help the poor people more, so Francis began giving away his possessions to those in need, even though that made his wealthy father angry. While worshipping at a mass in 1208, Francis heard the priest read the words of Jesus Christ, giving his disciples instructions for how to minister to people. Do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts, no bag for the journey, or extra shirt, or sandals, or a staff. And he believed that those words confirmed the calling he sensed to live a simple lifestyle himself so he could best preach the gospel to those in need. Saint Francis saw animals as his brothers and sisters because they were God's creatures, just like people. He said of animals, not to hurt our humble breathing in our first duty to them, but to stop there is not enough. We have a higher mission, to be of service to them wherever they require it. So Francis prayed that God would work through him to help animals as well as people. Flocks of birds would sometimes gather while Francis was speaking, and the Little Flowers of St. Francis of Assisi records that the birds listened intently to Francis' sermons. St. Francis lifted up his eyes and saw on some trees by the wayside a great multitude of birds, and being much surprised, he said to his companions, "Wait for me here by the way, while I go and preach to my little sisters the birds." And entering into the field, he began to preach to the birds which were on the ground. And suddenly all those also on the trees came around him, and all listened while St. Francis preached to them, and did not fly away until he had given them his blessing. While preaching to the birds, Francis would remind them of the many ways in which God had blessed them, and conclude his sermon by saying, "Beware, my little sisters, of the sin of ingratitude, and study always to give praise to God." So, because of this, St. Francis of Assisi was named the patron saint of animals and ecology. Thank you, and the end.